Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much to CPDP for organizing this panel. I'm very sorry for not being able to stay there in Brussels, but unfortunately I cannot attend in person the panel. Thank you very much, Georgios. Thank you very much to everybody who's attending the round table. And I'm going to start. I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see my presentation? Yeah. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about legal risks and safeguards from data protection perspective. This is the summary of my intervention. First, a short introduction, then just a few words about some technical issues, structural role of databases, legal risk, some words about mitigation mechanism, a brief reference to a question that I think that is very important if we are talking about AI training and data protection. That's data scrapping and legality, and final thoughts and governance. Artificial intelligence is emerging as one of the most influential technological vectors of the digital age, with the capacity, everybody knows, to transform multiple social and economic sectors. The process of training AI models depends at its core on sufficiently large and representative databases. In many cases, such databases contain personal information, which introduce significant tensions with the fundamental right to data protection recognized in Article 8 of the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, and also, for instance, in Spain, in Article 18(4) of the Spanish Constitution. In this framework, the governance of data used to train intelligence system cannot be reduced to a purely technical issue. A legal analysis is required that links the principles of processing, the rights of data subjects, and the risk associated with possible re-identification or improper inference of personal data from the generated models. Just a few words about some very simple technical issues. AI model training involves processing of large volumes of data to identify patterns, correlations, or behaviors. Databases act as organized repositories of this information, allowing for efficient storage, retrieval, and analysis. From a technical point of view, they can be distinguished. First, relational databases. SQL, relational databases, is a type of database. It uses a structure that allows us to identify and access data in relation to another piece of data in the database. Often, data in a relational database is organized into tables. Non-relational, secondly, non-relational databases management system designate not to store and retrieve data differently from traditional relational databases. They use flexible schemes and various data models like key value, document, graph, and wide column stores to handle unstructured or semi-structured data. Non-relational databases, NoSQL, are known for the scalability, high performance, and ability to handle large real-time data sets. Third, vector, use in generative AI. A base of a vector space is a set of vectors that are linearly independent and that generate the entire vector space. In other words, a base is a set of vectors that can be used to build any other vector in a space. In the latter case, in this case, they are particularly relevant for techniques such as retrieval augmented generation, RAG. RAG is a technique that enhances the performance of large language models, LLMs, by integrating external knowledge bases. It allows LLMs to access and incorporate relevant information outside the training data, improving the accuracy and relevance of their purposes, especially in specific domains or with proprietary data. Legal risk in using personal data. The use of personal data for the training of AI, artificial intelligence systems, must comply with, of course, the principles of Article 5 of the GDPR. All of us knows very well these principles in Article 5, the principle of transparency, lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and very important, accountability. Of this principle, all are very important when we are talking about training artificial intelligence. But perhaps the most important are the purpose limitation, data minimization, and accuracy, and of course, the accountability principle. Reuse of data from other purposes, such as medical records, social media, or judicial records, may violate these principles if sound legal basis is not ensured and data subjects are not adequately informed. The information transparency principle is also absolutely capital. Re-identification of supposedly anonymized data has been identified as one of the main risks in this area. Empirical studies have shown that even by applying de-identification techniques, it's possible to reconstruct individual profiles using correlation and data mining techniques. In addition, generative models such as LLMs may memorize literal fragments of data included in their training, which can lead to leaks of sensitive information. So, in view of this risk, everybody, both the doctrine and the supervisory authorities, recommend, of course, the adoption of security measures by design, privacy by design, and by default, privacy by default, the key article 25 of GDPR. The main techniques and strategies can include anonymization and pseudonymization, while both reduce the risk of identification. Only effective anonymization exempts from the application of the GDPR. Pseudonymization, on the other hand, allows for some traceability that keeps the data personal. Differential privacy. A mathematical technique that introduces controlled noise into aggregated results, ensuring that outputs do not depend on the presence or absence or a given individual. Federated learning allows models to be trained directly on the devices where the data resides, without transferring the data to central servers, which reduces exposure risks. Data protection impact assessment, EDPB. Article 35 of GDPR. This article states that the data protection impact assessment are mandatory where the processing involves a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons, such as in the case of massive or innovative uses of personal data for artificial intelligence. But also the Artificial Intelligence Act of May 24 sets out specific obligations for providers of high-risk artificial intelligence system in relation to the management of data using during training. Among these obligations is the need to ensure that data sets are relevant, representative, error-free, and complete as far as possible, as states Article 10.2 of Artificial Intelligence Act. Providers must also document in detail the origin of the data, its characteristics, the selection criteria, and any measures taken to mitigate bias, Article 10.3 and 10.4. Furthermore, traceability of the data life cycle and of the training process is required in order to facilitate the monitoring and auditing of the systems, as states Article 11. These requirements reinforce the principle of proactive accountability and are aligned with the principles of data quality, robust governance, and institutional transparency. In fact, again, Article 24 of the GDPR states this very important, this key principle of accountability.
José Luis, sorry, we are way ahead. You are running out of time.
Yes,
so
just
can you move
10
to
minutes.
the conclusions, maybe? Or
Yes, absolutely. Just one mention to data scrapping at legal risk. This case law of the European Court of Justice and in the States. I know that everybody knows this problem. And finally, final thoughts and governance. Beyond GDPR, we need a holistic governance is needed. Data governance for artificial intelligence requires a holistic approach, combining legal, organizational, and technological measures. This include rigorous documentation of the origin, processing, and purpose of the data used, auditing of models to detect bias, errors, or unwanted memories, and transparency regarding the data sets used, especially in foundational models. Conclusion, we need a balance between innovation and fundamental rights, and ethical and lawful data governance is crucial and the future focus is necessary to be this accountable artificial intelligence development. Thank you very much, dear Georgios, and that is all by the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jose Luis. Let's move on to Maria Granza Cantomoniz now.
Thank you very much. If I could have my slides, please. Good morning, everyone. It's not easy to present any topic after Jose Luis, and with this amazing panel, I will try to keep my best. So my topic to discuss here is about personal data in large language models, and I will focus on three main questions or problems. But I would like to start a discussion with a case study so that we can have a focus on a specific problem. So there is a government from a certain country, which doesn't matter right now, that launched a publicly funded initiative to develop an LLM, a large language model in a European language, capable of supporting, and this is the aim of the project, applications of the LLM in education, culture, science, public administration, among other. This project, the development of this LLM, is coordinated by a consortium which only includes public universities and bodies, only public entities, and it has broadly three main aims: to strengthen the digital sovereignty in a certain language, in a certain country, to promote that language, which I call it X, and to foster open science in the development of AI systems. So these are the three main aims of this project. The development of this LLM, which I call XPTO, implies the following three stages: a large-scale pre-training phase using web-based and institutional data in a certain language, only in a certain language, a EU language. A second stage, that is a supervised fine-tuning phase using instruction-based datasets. And a third stage, which they call domain-specific adaptation, through the integration of in the data of specialized data sets focused on educational materials, spoken language, scientific data, PhD thesis, so on and so forth, and public service content. This raises three of many other data protection questions. The first one is to clarify if there are personal data in the sources used for the training. The second question, which I will explain later on, is something that Jose Luis mentioned very briefly, to understand if there is what is called latent retention in the trained model. And the third problem is what is the exposure of personal data through the outputs of the LLM, through the answers that the LLM provides to any kind of user. So what data scientists told us, and this is something that we hear when we discuss AI, is that input data are publicly accessible data. Okay, my answer is yes, but publicly accessible data does not mean free to use without any kind of legal assessment, especially if there are personal data. And if we map all the streams of input data that will be used for the training of this model in this project, we see that there are official public sources, for example, parliamentary discussions with videos of parliamentary representatives with their names, their political opinions, their voices, their images. The project, as I told you, will also reuse academic data sets, for example, master thesis, PhD thesis, other kind of academic papers, which implies the contact, the institutional affiliation, the opinions of the scholars. And lastly, the project will also use media and open web information, newspaper articles and videos, which include, of course, opinions, eventually health data in the newspaper articles, names, images, so on and so forth. What data scientists also told us is that a phenomenon called latent retention can happen. And this phenomenon, which I've never heard before working on this project, on this case study, it basically refers to the phenomenon where an LLM indirectly remembers fragments of data from its training without storing them explicitly. Even when personal data is not memorized word for word, and I will give you an example of this, the model may still be able to reconstruct or infer this personal data when prompted in certain ways. So imagine that, as in this case, the training data includes academic bios, university pages, or public CVs, for example. Without explicitly storing any of them, a prompt like write a short profile of Graça Muniz, which is myself, a legal scholar working on AI and fundamental rights, may trigger a response where personal data is included and more information. So Graça Muniz is a professor of public law at Nova School of Law and Lusófona with a focus on digital regulation and data protection in the EU. If this information was never published in this exact form, but was inferred from scattered training data, the model has exhibited latent retention. So this is what latent retention means. And of course that among the many problems that LLMs pose in terms of legal discussions, latent retention, as just described at least, poses three challenges. The first one is that it makes data erasure almost impossible to ensure. The second is that it challenges compliance with purpose limitation and data minimization, two principles that José Luis mentioned before. And it may still fall under the GDPR's definition of personal data processing, not personal data, but personal data processing. The third question that I asked data scientists is if it is possible to control the output. And here there are a lot of discussions, but the main problem is that LLMs can generate output containing personal data, the example that I just gave before. But there is also potential for disclosure of names, sensitive information, political views. It may occur through model hallucination, which is broadly discussed, or malicious prompts. And of course that this also creates legal tensions, such as, for example, knowing if this is a data breach, if this can fill the definition of data breach, and also tensions with the principle of accuracy. Of course that I just give you an overview of three very specific questions that this project raises, but there are, of course, other challenges that I'm not going to discuss now because there are still other speakers in the panel, but then we can discuss later on, which is first, who is the data controller or who are the data controllers in this specific case? I don't have an answer for this. Does the concept of data controller make sense? Maybe it does make sense, like it does make sense in many other cases or projects where personal data is used. Can the scientific research exception be applied in this case, given that there is a very clear mission of research mission here, and all the intervenients are universities and research centers? Another problem is with the scientific research exception side by side with it in the GDPR, you know that there is another exception, which is archiving purposes in the public interest, which I've never applied in practice and I never heard of, but it can also be applied in this case. And another question is if this project fills the public interest legal ground and other comments and other references in the GDPR of public interest that we can read, because this clearly has a public interest in the sense that the government of this country had a big intervention in launching the project, in supporting the project, in financing the project. So I think that this is a discussion that is worth having. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Grazia, and thank you very much for respecting the time, even less than you were allowed to. So Maria Biliri is the next speaker.
Thank you all for your insights. Thank you all for being here. My presentation, which is not on, is about anonymity and AI models. So, okay. So we will start by defining AI models and training data. We will also discuss the concept and actually the gray areas, or let's say the critical issues related to anonymization, especially based on the relevant guidelines issued by the Working Party 29 back in 2014. Still awaiting an update based on the GDPR, but we'll see. And we will then proceed with examining anonymity on AI models, especially, of course, in the light of the EDPB opinion issued some months ago regarding certain data protection aspects related to the processing of personal data in the context of AI models, which was issued following relevant requests submitted by the Irish Supervisory Authority. So, defining AI models. There is actually an indirect definition in the AI Act, according to which AI models are essential components, but components of AI system. They are integrated into the AI systems and, of course, form part of them. The EDPB opinion focuses on a narrower definition based on the submitted request. Actually, it is stated that AI models are to compass the product resulting from the training in the context of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, or, of course, other related processing contexts. So we first need to understand what learning means for AI models. So we have three different categories. We can start from there, which is the supervised learning, the unsupervised learning, and the reinforcement learning. In supervised learning, the algorithmic model is calibrated by matching predictions with supposedly correct results already contained in the training. Of course, unsupervised training is the opposite, a type of machine learning that learns from data without any human supervision. This means that unsupervised machine learning models are given unlabeled data and are allowed to discover patterns on their own without any explicit guidance or instruction. And the third category is a reinforcement learning, which is when AI develops an optimal strategy, which is determined on the basis of a learning environment consisting of data that, let's say, sends feedback. It's kind of reward signals to the model. As you might have already imagined, training data is the basis for both supervised learning and simulation environments in the area of reinforcement learning. So these two techniques, just to keep in mind, are the basis for most of the AI applications that we are currently familiar with, from automated face recognition, credit scoring, to superhuman performance of AI agents. So let's try to define training data. The definition provided in the text of AI Act is quite simple. Data used for training an AI system through fitting its learnable parameters. So, what kind of information might be used as training data? There might be three different categories, in my opinion, of course. There might be personal data, anonymous or anonymized data. Some of you might wonder why anonymous or anonymized data are a separate category, but we will see a little bit later. And we, of course, have non-personal data on non-personal identifiers. So starting from actually understanding the concept of anonymization, I will provide you with somehow of a definition. We can say that data is anonymized when a natural person might no longer be identified or is no longer identifiable. But the thing here is to understand what identifiable means. Means a natural person that might be identified by. And here we first see the recital 26 of the Data Protection Directive, according to which, in order to consider someone non-identifiable, we need to think of all means likely reasonably to be used by either the controller or a third party. And then we have recital with the same number in the GDPR, which kind of repeats these two requirements, but also defines that the means likely reasonable to be used are determined based on objective factors such as the cost, of course, and the amount of time required for identification. Let's say we can say that means likely reasonable are those that might take, I don't know, decades for identifying someone, a single individual, taking, of course, into consideration the available technology at the time of the processing and all technological developments. Of course, the concept of the controller or a third party is repeated, and we also have an addition that the identification might be direct or indirect. But the issue here, and the thing that is related to why I categorized anonymized data as something different to non-personal data, is that anonymization is not forever. This means that the data might be anonymous today, but might not be anonymous. A re-identification might be possible in the next year or months or whatever. So, what's about applying anonymization? It's stripping data of sufficient elements according to the opinion issued by the Working Party 29. Conspicuous identifier. So, even when removing the sufficient elements that lead to identification, there are three main risks. The first is singling out. I might use just an example to help you understand. It's, for instance, when I have a data set that indicates that an individual is 3 meters tall. I mean, how many people are 3 meters tall? So you can uniquely identify the data subject. It's linkability. It's the possibility, actually the ability to link at least two records concerning the same natural person or group of natural persons. This might be, for instance, that we have some information from a nature file, and we also have some information that we can retrieve from LinkedIn. And we have also the risk of inference, the possibility to deduce with significant probability the value of an attribute from the values of a set of other attributes. Actually, there are many methods that might be applied for anonymization, but they are categorized as follows. We have randomization. It's, let's say, a family of practices, of methods, and we also have generalization. So I move on to some gray areas, which actually have a significant importance, starting from an issue already resolved, which is whether underlying data should be deleted in order for us to consider data anonymous. This question actually has arisen following the issuance of the Working Party 29 guidelines. According to the Working Party, a data set cannot be anonymized if the controller retains the information from which it is derived, even if later information is privately and securely stored. However, as I have already said, this issue was resolved and practically answered by the GDPR, which is quite different to this perspective. And then we move to the next two questions which are closely linked. Is the anonymization standard relative or absolute? Meaning that should re-identification be possible for anyone or for the controller and maybe some parties that might want to actually proceed with re-identification? So you see here that the relevant question is whether re-identification should not be possible or very reasonably alike. What does it mean? We have different point of views. I have here a decision issued, it's the Breyer case, where the court stated, the Court of European Justice stated that dynamic IP addresses could constitute personal data even though the information necessary for re-identification was held by a third party, actually an ISP, an internet service provider, and was not immediately accessible to the controller, the German state. But since the German state could just submit a request, they considered data were not anonymous. And for instance, CNIL as well states that identification should be practically impossible in order to consider data anonymized. We have opposite opinions, like those of the Irish Data Protection Authority, according to which practitioners should consider probable intruders and their motives. And we also have a recent decision which could be discussed further. It's about the test of the average or likely reader. The case was that there was a press release that, according to that the question was whether it contained personal data, and the court stated that it should be to determine whether they are or not personal data. We should be able to apply the average or likely reader criterion. Okay, I think that I'm running out of time, so I'm moving on. And just answer two basic questions. Are AI models trained on personal data? Is it possible to be considered anonymous? Actually, there was an interesting discussion paper issued by the Hamburg Commissioner for Data Protection and Freedom of Information, stating that no personal data is stored in LLMs. That made everybody happy because we started thinking that GDPR or some provision might not apply. However, the EDPB had a different opinion. AI models, when provide as an answer personal data, already stated, cannot be considered anonymous. In all other cases, determination of whether an AI model is anonymous should be asked by the supervisory authorities, which is quite interesting, and we will have to see what they will decide. And they should, supervisory authorities should consider the likelihood of direct extraction of personal data regarding individuals whose personal data were used to train the model, as well as the likelihood of obtaining intentionally or not sub-personal data by submitting queries to the model. So I just want to point out that there are some elements for assessing anonymity of AI models that are included in the opinion issued by the EDPB. They are they are provided indicatively, but we see four different elements: the design, the analysis of the model, the testing or resistance to attacks, and documentation, which is something we are all familiar with and comes from the GDPR. And the concept is actually providing all documentation in accordance with the articles of the GDPR. So in order to not run out of time, I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. And now, last but not least, Professor Zenkovic.
Thank you. If I can have the slides. Okay. I'll just focus on a very narrow topic. As you can see, application in journalism and fact-checking. And one of the main concerns that we have in the use of AI, and which is already very one finds many cases in this field, is the fact of falsification of reality, fake news, deep fakes, and so on. So it's already, AI is already there, creating something completely different world, false world. And so you just select databases, you feed artificial intelligence model, and you train it to achieve certain results. So, I mean, this is what we find, and we find many cases, for example, in Spain, there's been some relevant cases, including deep fakes concerning minors. But at the same time, artificial intelligence can represent an antidote to this distorted use. And so we can try to understand if one can use artificial intelligence somehow to counter deepfakes and fake news. However, the point is, and it's always been there, and this is something that's been there since we've had databases, is the GIGO principle, garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad data which feed your system, whatever your database is, obviously you will have garbage result. So, and this is very important because somehow quite often it's not considered of where do you collect the data, where does this data come from, especially from artificial intelligence when you have an enormous amount, you need an enormous amount of data. So you say, oh, but I'll collect the data from whatever source, which obviously brings to distorted results. So the first issue for correct use of AI system is trying to verify the databases. So the first is, just like ingredients, you want to know what's in something that you're eating or something you're drinking, and you want to know what the ingredients are. And that is the same issue of what the database system is fed with. And as you see, there's a quote comes from statistics, and we know that, statistics, well, they're lies, bloody lies, and statistics. So as Prime Minister Disraeli said only a century and something ago. But what is relevant when we look at media outlets is that media outlets can be significantly vulnerable to information manipulation through AI. We've had a case in Italy in which there was fake profile which was created on purpose and was fed to a news agency, and then obviously they made a whole, and this was done from a sort of a TV program, and they presented on TV and said, listen, we show you how easy it is to fake reality, and here we have a fake profile, someone who apparently is a great philanthrope and so on, and it was obviously completely false. And so once the manipulation has happened and it's been put on in the media outlets, especially if we look at the news agency or anyhow on social media, well, it will infect the rest of the digital environment. And this should be considered because, it's not, if we look at news, even very reputable news, we see that AI is commonly used, economic, financial, sports. I want to know who won the Premier League and who over the last 100 years, and obviously I put everything together, and artificial intelligence gives me this result in 1 second. So it's commonly used by media outlets. And here we have also the very significant concern throughout Europe, and not only throughout Europe, of artificial intelligence substituting journalists. It's much quicker, it doesn't cost, the research work is made by the system and not by a human, and probably sometimes you could be much more precise than a human. So I'll show you, I won't read them, but if you just take note of the sources, you will see that there's a general debate throughout Europe on the use of artificial intelligence in creating information. And here, for example, talk about Belgium, and here we see this board of Flemish journalists, and so you just go on the website and you will find this. You will find specific indications of code of ethics introduced, guidelines introduced by here in Belgium. Then the Independent Press Regulation Trust, the IMPRESS code. There you have again another case. I won't read it to you, but just to show you how this is a widespread concern among professionals, whether organized in a board or not, on what is the role of artificial intelligence, and clearly of the databases feeding artificial intelligence in creating information. And Italy again, here another case, the code of ethics, and then we have two international texts, the Council of Europe, which has these guidelines on responsible implementation of artificial intelligence systems in journalism, and then the Reporters Sans Frontières, there's this Paris Charter on AI and journalism. Just to show you there's quite a lot of literature on which one can start, one can reason, one can try to have a series of bearings on where to set the relationship between information and artificial intelligence systems. Now, what is the final line I would like to make? First of all, how you control databases that are used for AI journalism. And here I would suggest, again, I would refer to the Reuters Institute, which is connected with Oxford University. I've just given you, you can find the link there, and a whole lot of initiatives, very interested in you know, what are the concerns, and Reuters is obviously being a being a news agency, a world news agency, obviously feeds hundreds of media outlets, so it's very important, this kind of research. And then again, another project which is within the Reuters Institute is pooling reputable media outlets which can generate and feed reliable databases. So they put all these information together. You could put, you know, the Guardian, you could put Le Monde, you might put the Washington Post, you put various databases, and you put them all together, and this can feed reputable databases. I would like to make a point here, as we are here at CPDP. I mean, I would venture to say that many of the concerns that have been presented in the previous, by the previous panelists, I would think that these kinds of databases fall outside I mean, they would fall within the general exception of Article 85 of the GDPR. So I think that, I mean, if we put all these databases together and they come from reputable media outlets, I think that they should be limited GDPR concerns. But obviously this is, you know, the sort of the authorities, the data protection authorities, and in each country and in Brussels are, you know, are very, they like to sort of be very, they're very picky, and so they might have something to say. But I would suggest that they fall within the Article 85 exception. So this is just to show that, I mean, when we're looking at databases and AI training, I think it should be important we start of looking at what sector we are using them in, and it could be the medical sector, which is extremely important and can save lives, and we should see the case that Professor Cantomoni's presented, which is educational and promotion of national culture and so on. So I think this is very important that we distinguish the various cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincenzo. Now, we're at the point that I'm supposed to sum up the whole thing. Okay, I'll try to be very brief. We will still have some time for questions. We are okay in terms of time. So I will start with Professor Pinar. José Luis spoke about the legal risks and so on from the data protection perspective. He spoke about data gathering and data retrieval. We have this facility, we have this facilitation of data, you know, but still the GDPR rules apply. Still the AI Act rules apply. So we have to keep up with those rules. But apart of that, if I had to take one phrase home from the speech of Professor Pinar, is that we have to move a little bit forward. We have to see a holistic governance beyond GDPR, because we have this impetus of this huge production of legislation on behalf of the Union, and we have to see it with a holistic approach. Maria Grazia spoke about personal data in LLMs. She had a very good example about an LLM for education, and she has explained particular new problems that may arise. in particular, the problem of latent retention. She has explained what this latent retention is. The problem we have here is we have a technical difficulty to tackle that problem because we can have no erasure of that data. So again, we have a conflict with GDPR principles. That's obvious. I mean, not only one principle, but a few, the minimization principle, the purpose principle, and so on. But it's not only that. If I had to take, again, one phrase from Maria Grazia to take it home, would be the new challenges that we have. Because there was an implication that maybe we can have control of the output of these large linguistic models. So we have new challenges to face, and we have to adapt again to those new challenges. Maria Birilli spoke about the particular problem of anonymization of data. Okay, she has explained everything about anonymization, the methods, the proposals from the GDPR, from the European Data Protection Board. Okay, we all understand that there is a need for anonymization according to the current rules, and also about the problems in applying anonymization to AI models. Again, here, if I had to take one phrase, it would be that we have enormous difficulties to assess anonymity in AI models. And in that sense, no matter how many guidelines have been issued by the European Data Protection Board, the practical implementation of these guidelines will have, insurmountable difficulties, great difficulties in tackling these problems. Professor Zenkovic, as I said, last but not least, he spoke about the particular applications in journalism and fact-checking. Well, we all know he has explained a few things about the falsification of reality, the fake news. We all know about that. The next step is, after all, is information manipulation. We don't want that. There is a fear that we may have AI to substitute journalists. In that sense, again, we have a lot of guidelines, we have a lot of code of ethics. Will all these guidelines and code of ethics, judging from my jurisdiction, what is called soft law has limited, a limited power of success. And in that sense, I'm a bit skeptic about all this bulk of guidelines from journalists, Vincenzo mentioned 2 or 3 countries, I think, with code of ethics and so on. Will that be successful? As I said, I'm hesitating. The other solution, the solution of reputable databases which function outside the GDPR and can be used for AI models. We have a sort of stable point of reference to look into. That could be a better solution. But again, the last phrase to take again home from Vincenzo was, it is very important to distinguish and to identify the particular sector. We all had the COVID situation, if it is medical, if it is just gossip about, public figures and so on, that makes a difference, okay? You understand that. That was the wrapping up of the whole situation. I think we should move forward. We do have the current rules that apply, but I think, going back to what Professor Pinar said, we have to move to a more holistic model about the whole situation. Thank you very much. Now we have plenty of time for questions. Well, plenty, 15 minutes, but yeah. So I'll give the word to the floor. Yes, please.
I have a question around some of
I think it's
people.
not on the mic.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah?
It's good?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I think the problem or a question I had around the anonymization approach is if you do that, or if you have to delete the underlying database, then I think you have the clash with being able to verify and the accountability principle. And I was just curious what you think about that and how you can achieve that if you do have to delete underlying data to achieve anonymity.
Actually, the thing is that according to the GDPR, we do not need, there is no need for somebody to delete those data if privately stored and if security measures are applied. I mean that this was kind of a misunderstanding from the guidelines issued back in 2014. But, in the case where we actually need to think of the reasonably available measures and how and who can actually re-identify the data subject. So imagine how many practical issues might arise in the case where a company or an organization has to delete anything and not even have access to the data where actually the aggregated data or the statistical data were derived from. I think that according to the GDPR, there is no such need, but we need to apply sufficient technical and organizational measures so that we can ensure that the data from where the statistical data were derived won't be available to someone that wants to run the re-identification process. That's the thing, and that's why I said that was an issue, but all the community agreed that it's not an issue anymore since the GDPR kind of clarifies these things.
Thank you. I'm Flavio Piemontese from the University of Glasgow, and well, I wanted to ask about bias, because when we talk about AI training, especially those black box models, it's very hard to have accountability then afterwards, and didn't hear much about bias, so I wanted to hear about your view on the topic, as those models are known to often show them repeatedly and with some dire consequences, I would say.
Yeah, that goes to Maria Grazia, maybe, yes?
Well, I think that my answer is not really an answer. One way to avoid bias or to apply the technical and adequate measures that we were discussing before is to apply a curating process to the data that you are using while training the data. And from my experience, what is very challenging when you are dealing with LLMs, for example, which is the only experience that I can talk with some arguments, is that first of all, the first answer that you get from data science when you explain to them that you have to apply technical and adequate measures to avoid potential biases from the output of the LLM, the first answer is that that's not possible anymore because I'm using a database that was pre-trained by someone else, not by myself, my project, so I cannot do that. And the second answer that I receive very often is that it's too costly for me to apply those technical measures to split what is reputable data or reputable information from non-useful information for the project. So from my experience, which is not very significant, only focused on LLMs, it's very challenging to implement adequate technical and organizational measures to avoid biases, especially because the main problem here is it's not exactly a legal problem. It's a problem of when lawyers or researchers or scholars, which I collaborate with researchers in multiple projects, and the case study is just one example of a research project. When they ask lawyers the opinion, it's probably already late to ensure that things will go well and that everything will be complied. And that's not a legal problem. It's really a problem of a cultural problem and a mindset problem, at least in the country where I come from, which is Portugal.
Thank you, Maria Grazia. Did I see any other hand? No? Yes, please. Yeah, anyway. Okay, you'll be next.
Just one question, yes or no question, potentially. Would you consider that creating a general purpose AI model is in itself a purpose specific enough to be in compliance with Article 5.1b? It's one of the two elements of purpose limitation principle. Thank you.
Can you repeat the first part of your question, please? Because it's very important.
Would you consider that the purpose of creating a general purpose AI model is in itself specific enough to comply with 5.1b?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is. And in this case, what I advised them was to, the project was presented to me with different stages and different tasks. And I only gave you a very broad overview of 3 of those tasks. And what I suggested in terms of identifying the purpose of processing was to focus on those tasks, those specific tasks, and what was the use of data for those specific tasks. And with that recommendation, I kind of have a more granular overview of what was going on in the project and for what the data were being used. Okay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I would love to ask you, how do you ensure the data subject rights? And when personal data is used for AI training, for example, data subject requests, how do you deal with that? What is your perspective? Thank you.
Maybe Jose Luis, or yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry?
Go on.
Yeah, again,
Again, good morning, Catarina. Catarina was my previous student, so I'm very happy to meet her here. My main concern in this case study that I presented to you is transparency with the data subject. And the GDPR, as I can imagine you know, has one article, which is 14, that is applied when the data are not directly collected from the data subject. And then there are several exceptions that can be applied in this project. Regarding all the other data subjects requests, that's a very good question to which I don't have an answer right now. Okay. I don't know if Maria or Jose
Actually, I mentioned something about the discussion paper issued according to which in LLMs there are no personal data, so some provision, especially those about the data subject rights, are not applied. And I think that this was something like a dream for all data protection officers. But unfortunately, that's not true. I mean, the data subjects still have their rights, and the huge challenge is to find, I think, a technical way to facilitate the examination and actually to provide them with accurate answers, because we have many challenges to face, like the one already raised and mentioned. Let's say we have black boxes, and then somebody comes asking you to provide details on how an automated decision was made. So it's a challenge we have to face, and all data scientists and lawyers and scholars should collaborate on this issue.
Yes, sir.
it's not working.
No. Yeah, there
Okay.
you go. Yeah.
Hey, Jeroen de Wijn from SURF, the Dutch NRAM. One of the things that we are currently working on, and I want to have your perspective on, is that, of course, the LLMs and the databases are part of a system, and we're trying to solve this problem by doing it on the system side, by doing it on the front-end side, by implementing guardrails and other kinds of Presidio-like, preferably not Presidio, but kind of technology to, if you can't do it on the model side, then at least try to deal with it on the output side, on the input-output side. What's your opinion on that?
It's for me, right? I think that on the module side, on the system side, of course, I agree that it's one option to go. But from my experience, again, which is very narrow, very focused on this example, I think that the solution is to have from the start, it's to apply what José Luis was saying about data protection by design and by default. And that's not happening right now for several reasons. One is cultural, as I told you before. In addition to that, everything that you can do to correct potential problems is useful, of course. So I agree.
Yeah. That links with documentation as well. I already mentioned, and the EDPB has already mentioned. So we always need to take into consideration Article 27 of the GDPR and all this stuff about accountability and documenting. But my question is actually something I'm always thinking about is how easy it is to comply with all of these requirements and documentation and on contacting FRIAs and PIAs and so on. So I totally understand, and I still believe that the thing is to kind of collaborate and to contribute to actually make some soft law or code of ethics, or I don't know, some guidelines that might help, but should be sector specific, and all experience gains should be actually, we should take advantage of it. That's my point of view.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much all for being here. Thanks to the organizers for organizing this panel, and to our South EU Google Data Governance Chair, and see you next year.